If we start with this idea of trust and ensuring there's a human at the helm, and that we have secure, grounded, trusted customer data fed into the applications with AI that we can trust, that provides a great experience, and you're actually elevating the ethics and the transparency of the technology stack.
I'm here with Frank Fillman, our EVP and General Manager of Australia and New Zealand at Salesforce. Welcome, Frank.
Hey, nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
You know, you're out there meeting customers. I'm glad I just managed to get you for a moment here to share some of the thoughts that you have.
I'm excited to not be on a plane. I'm in a chair. I'm on land here, so let's go.
Love it. Well, look, let's use that as a segue. I know you're out there meeting C-suite, boards. You know, what's top of mind for them? What are they sharing with you right now?
I think CEOs right now are really overwhelmed. So since February, I wanted to spend a lot of time really talking to customers and understanding AI and in general, how are things going. CEOs right now are getting pressure from four sides. They're getting pressure from above, from the board, to get going on AI, even if there's no clarity on what that means.
Get going.
It's just like, let's get started. There's also pressure externally, where the pace of change of technology and AI, it's overwhelming. It's moving so fast. It's faster than it's ever moved, and it's probably going to speed up. Then there's pressure internally, and there's challenges where the systems and the data and the teams, they're not connected, and it's really hard to figure out how to solve some of these challenges. And then the final piece of pressure is coming from below. And here's what I mean by that. You might have a data lake with all your customer data, which isn't accessible to the seller on the front line. The challenge is they report to different people. And so those different teams are delegating up, and that's putting this sort of compression engine around the CEO, and it's making their life a lot harder.
Wow, it's a tough gig at the moment to be that CEO. It's always been, but I think it's getting tougher.
It is.
So, you know, when you're having conversations, you know, what are you sharing? How can Salesforce help them? Like, where are we playing in their, in their space?
Yeah, well, first off, I think where the transformation, where the disruption is happening in AI, it's all happening at relationship, experience, and frontline, okay? And in the absence of having an AI strategy, what we're seeing is employees are bringing in their personal phone, right? And if you think about what Gen AI is, it's the same engine under the hood, if it's consumer or enterprise. The challenge is when you bring in a consumer phone, right? You're drawing information from the web, and when you're typing information looking for answers, it's pushing information back out
there.
But so there's this onset of shadow IT, which is bringing risk into the organization. And so what we're saying is, where do we help employees? And it's at that frontline level. It's at the frontline level because most employees, they don't have access to all the customer information, the records, the policies. And so they're doing their best, but they might have to apologize. They might have to transfer the call. They might have to sort of give a generic answer. And so until the frontline team has information in the application that's AI driven, there's going to be a gap.
It's super interesting. It reminds me of actually, I think when iPhones came into the enterprise, right? Because people wanted this new technology to help them personally, but everyone internally was like, don't use that. But we know how that goes, right? Like that frontline person needs to get their job done. And if they see a better way, that's that internal pressure, that upward pressure you're talking about. Super fascinating. So, where is this working? So, you're working with some of our customers out there. Can you share a little bit about that, how they got there and some examples?
So I think if you think about one of the large banks here in Australia, they have dozens of people that all day long, all they do is listen to calls in the contact center for cues and opportunities to better help and serve those customers. And now they're finding that AI-generated technology is doing that work. And so now they're freed up to go drive more value to the organization. By the way, it's a lot more fulfilling work. You're more likely to keep those amazing people excited about their role. And I think this is this crazy idea right now that productivity and intimacy have historically been trade-offs. Well, now when you have AI-driven applications, the employee has a much better experience. The engagement with a customer is much more efficient, and the customer leaves with a better experience. And that all drives bottom line impact to the company. And so this is a way that we can kind of make everyone happy there. And that's this exciting idea that you can have all of it together.
So tell me, like, how did that use case even come about? Was that an example? I don't imagine the CEO realized that would be the use case of Gen AI. Do you know how that really manifested?
The reality is, customers know their own processes and challenges quite well. And so the more that we come in with a curious mindset of what problems are you trying to solve? By the way, here's how the technology works. In this case, they looked at it and said, as much as we want to look at this over here, hang on, this solves a massive problem for us. And I think maybe this is the point that I would want everyone to understand. So many customers are so close to having access to such great capability because they have all the infrastructure in place. They already have employees working in the application. It's just a matter of curating the data underneath, and engaging Gen AI inside the application, but 90% of the work is done. And so we see customers that they're not taking quarters and years to implement this stuff. They're doing it in days and weeks because they're adding on capabilities that already exist. And so that's where I think the speed to value would surprise a lot of people, how fast you can get going. Find a problem, go solve it, keep experimenting, and go from there.
I love that. It's the crawl, walk, run sort of analogy. Let's talk a little bit about the data there you mentioned. And it is true. Companies have for years been building data in silos, so to speak, by departments usually. And you're right. If you just connected it together, you could actually get some value. And it's actually imperative in AI. Yeah. How are you finding, does the CEO or the C-suite understand this? Is this the CIO's problem? Who's addressing this challenge?
Well, I think it becomes a CEO's challenge because you've got the back office information and assets and technology and data, and then you have the people that are touching the customer. And so the challenge is they don't report to the same people. In some cases, it goes to the COO, and most organizations, it goes to the CEO, and that becomes a challenge. So you have to look at this holistically, and I think that's where some of the pressure's coming from. But it's really around, you've got all this incredible data. And so this idea of the data cloud, which can pull all this information together, so when you do it properly, you're adding so much more value to the data lake environment. So if you've invested in Databricks,
which many customers have.
Yeah, right? So everyone has a data lake, right? Or a data pond, depending on how you want to define it. When you can take that gold that's hidden in that data lake and expose it in a moment that matters between an employee and a customer and deliver an incredible experience, you get much more value from the data lake. The applications become more powerful, and AI becomes more trusted and higher integrity. And that's like this incredible thing where you invest in here and the entire stack becomes more valuable.
Can you help expand a little bit? Like, what does it mean if someone brings consumer technology to the enterprise? Like, what's the risk for the organization?
Well, we've always seen shadow IT, right? Because the business always wants to enable people to be more productive. And then IT always wants to have this sort of central element of governance where they can enable the different parts. But the challenge is most organizations, they've been created over decades, maybe centuries, and they have a lot of legacy tech and debt. And sometimes employees get a bit impatient and they want access to have
get their job done,
more fulfillment, have a better quality of life. Frankly, just get more done and be able to go home. Okay, and so in the absence of providing it to them, they're going to bring in their own iPhone. The challenge when they do that is even though it's the same generative AI on their personal phone that would otherwise be enterprise AI in an application, if you don't give it to them, they're going to bring that in. And that's this sort of scary element of there's this risk of all the shadow IT coming in, and it's adding risk to organizations. And you don't even know what you're accidentally pushing out on the web. And that's the challenge. And I think if organizations actually understood the breadth of it, they would want to move even faster to stem that risk. So so part of it is let's not do the risky stuff. The other part is if we start with this idea of trust and ensuring there's a human at the helm, and that we have secure, grounded, trusted customer data fed into the applications with AI that we can trust, that provides a great experience, and you're actually elevating, the ethics and the transparency of the technology stack.
So tell me a little bit here then, you've worked extensively, obviously you're from the US, you've been across the region in Australia, New Zealand. Is there any differences in our region versus the rest of the world? Any advice on potentially local companies versus global companies? Anything you're seeing?
It's really interesting if you think about the disruption to businesses, and I think this is generated by AI, but it's not an AI statement. The idea that there's going to be disruption coming to businesses. If you were to poll globally, and this was a PricewaterhouseCoopers CEO global survey, 53% of global CEOs believe they're going to have to disrupt themselves, or they face disruption or extinction or whatever. Here in Australia, it's 15%.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so now it's different. There's an oligopoly structure and there's more regulation that might protect a lot of organizations. But I think there's a different risk appetite here. And so I think what we need to do is focus on how do we inspire and help organizations locally leverage technology to drive growth and innovation to stay on the front foot and make sure as those risks come in that they're more prepared for them.
So how would you recommend this? Folks listening online, they want to jump in, right? How do they start? Do they come to you? Do they message you, Frank? What's the way? How do you recommend they get going?
First off, it's like, what does Salesforce do and where do we fit? Because there's a lot of technology vendors. And the way that you'll hear us talk about it is, right, it's the UI, it's the model and the data, right? So when we talk about the UI, what I think is really important is to realize all the disruption and the transformation will happen in the front line. It's the front office. And that's luckily where we've played for 25 years. That's our sweet spot. But if you think about the impact of the UI, all that means is we're adding Gen AI inside the application where people are already doing the work. It's not this thing over here. It's not this other phone they have to fiddle with.
Flow of work.
It's in the flow of work. It's in the application they're using, which makes a ton of sense. It's much more efficient. We talk about the model. We don't sell LLMs, right? There's a lot of providers out there. We have an agnostic open platform approach. Buy it, build it, bring it, we're good. And then you look at the data, and I think this is the differentiator. The great news is the organizational intelligence, if you could capture it from organization, it's incredible, it's complete, but it's not connected. And so it doesn't do any good when the systems don't talk. And so this idea with Data Cloud, it's like the United Nations. You could take 20 different people that take 20 languages. What if you could allow them to speak one language and allow that information to flow into the applications and into AI? The entire stack becomes, more relevant and more valuable. And I think when customers go, well, where do I get started? Look at what you already have in place today. Chances are you have a data lake. Chances are you have people working in a front office application. You're curious about AI. It's a matter of saying, if you've already got 80%, how do you close that 20% gap? Engage your account executive, engage our team, and look at low-hanging fruit, areas to get started. It probably is going to take a lot less time than you think. And the more you start and the faster you experiment in a safe, trusted environment, the more you can start converting this from an AI capability to a business outcome.
I'm going to put you on the hot seat for this last question.
Okay.
We're at 1 year in the future, 2 years in the future. Where do you think it's going for us?
Well, I think what scares me the most is the speed of change, right? And I try to be deeply empathetic. When I meet with a CEO, they live their entire life in the industry that they're in, right? Whether that's automotive or consumer goods, they're not thinking about technology all day. And I think it's incumbent on us as technology over the last year. You go from Gen AI not existing to having 100 million people on the platform in 7 weeks, right? And we're a year and a half since then. This change we believe it's going to speed up. And the challenge is, if you have a senior executive who isn't as tech savvy, they haven't spent their whole year or their whole career in tech. If we don't do a better job of simplifying and bringing relevant, specific use cases in context of how they're doing their job, then their job becomes more overwhelming. That's what I'm concerned of. How do we help be a better shepherd and take a customer on a journey and bring some fresh ideas? And it's all about value in real time that drives efficiency and productivity, that frees up capital to invest in growth and experience. That's the kind of value we want to bring to our customers. But there's a lot going on, so we have to work even faster and harder to do it right.
I think everyone tuning in definitely wants growth and continued success for their businesses. So very sage advice.
Yeah.
Frank, I know you're a busy man to catch, so thank you for spending the time, sharing your advice with our executives, and I'm sure you're going to get a few messages after this.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and have an awesome day.